In the hybrid world of work, where in person and remote interactions coexist, it is crucial to master personal branding in real and virtual environments to deliver a consistent and compelling brand. But what strategies can be employed to maintain a consistent and compelling personal brand in both an in person and remote working environment? Well, for this episode of the Good Leadership Podcast, I'm joined by renowned personal branding expert Will Arruda, who will discuss proven strategies to do just that. Branding is not just about being famous, Arruda explains, it's about being selectively famous. And I know that you'll enjoy this episode, which is filled with many quick and easy ways to build an authentic brand that will help you to stand out and get noticed. Welcome, everyone, to this Good Leadership Podcast. My name is Charles Good, your host and the president of the Institute for Management Studies. This podcast is designed to provide you with actionable insights and tools that you can use from discussing the research, stories, and background from recognized experts and practitioners to accelerate your impact in your current role. Welcome to this episode of the Good Leadership Podcast. I'm glad to be joined today by William Arruda, an entrepreneur, speaker, and the world's leading authority on the topic of personal branding. He is a best-selling author of the definitive books on the topic as well, including Digital You, Career Distinction, and Ditch, Dare, and Do. He has also delivered presentations to many of the world's most revered brands, including American Express, Google, Gucci, LinkedIn, Microsoft, and Target. And as a personal branding pioneer, he is credited with turning the concept of personal branding into a global industry. Welcome to the program, Will.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I've been looking forward to it.
Wonderful. Well, I always like to get started with giving our listeners a little bit of background on you. So if you could provide us a little bit of background and really what got you interested into the space of personal branding.
I think I'm like a lot of people where I went to college not knowing what I wanted to do. So I picked the hardest thing I could come up with, which was electrical engineering. And I graduated, maybe the world's worst engineer on the planet, and quickly was able to move into consulting and then into marketing for high tech. And that's when I found what I was really passionate about, which was marketing and branding. And I got to work for this amazing company called Lotus 123, Lotus Notes, which was acquired by IBM. And I loved my job. I had the coolest branding job. We were the most amazing company. Everything was great until Tom Peters' article in Fast Company magazine, The Brand Called You, came out. And I picked up the magazine from my assistant's desk and I read the article. I put the article down and said, I am going to start the first ever personal branding company. And that's kind of how I went from being an engineer to an entrepreneur.
Well, I think everyone has read that article. If not, we'll put that in the show notes. A brand called You, the famous 1997 article where Tom Peters really coined that term. But now there's been decades that have passed. And now in 2023, we get a lot of naysayers saying that personal branding is not really alive and well anymore. And you give three reasons really in your book that really it's alive and well, and there might be some challenges, but if you could just kind of bring us up to speed on where are we with personal branding right now, and why are there naysayers saying that it's dead?
Yeah, well, I think it's like anything else. First of all, at the very beginning when I was there, nobody knew what it was, and fewer people were even interested in knowing about it, right? And then all of a sudden, people started to realize, oh my gosh, it's my job to take care of my career, and it's really LinkedIn and other things like that that made us start to think about maybe my company doesn't manage my career, maybe it's my responsibility. And so I think that's where personal branding just took off. And the other thing that happened back then is companies started to realize, wow, I shouldn't be afraid of personal branding. If I use personal branding to help my people unearth what makes them exceptional, they're going to deliver better value at work and they're more likely to stay here longer. So that was kind of the sweet spot in the beginning of personal branding. And then, like anything, right, it became big and everyone started talking about it. And a lot of people started talking about it, I think, in a way that's completely counter to how I look at personal branding. It wasn't about authenticity. It wasn't about figuring out who you are and using that to be successful. It was more about creating an image and being visible in social media all the time. And I think that created a lot of noise. And not only noise, but people started to really discount personal branding. It's people taking these incredible selfies and posting 15 a day. And I think that's where personal branding started to have a little bit of a tarnish to it. And what has happened since then, though, is, I mean, we've all been living in the last decade or so of all these rapid changes in the workplace, the rapid infusion of tech, the fact that there are so many other people who do what we do. what makes us stand out, the lack of humanity that's happening at work now that many of us are working remotely. All of this is creating this new resurgence. And I mean, personal branding is going crazy again as an opportunity to really align who you are with what you do and how you do it.
Oh, that's well said. And I get this a lot where they say this there's just too much noise in the market. There's too much going on. There's too much content being dumped. So it's becoming harder and harder to really differentiate your brand. But that doesn't mean that you should stop doing it. If anything, you just have to be more strategic in the tools that you use, right?
Exactly. And the big thing that people need to remember, personal branding is not about being famous. It's about being selectively famous. So it doesn't matter if all this noise is out there in the marketplace, but you're not trying to have the whole world really connect with you. You need to be clear about what you want to do and then identify the community of people you want to be visible to, you want to deliver value to every day. In that community, if you can stand out and be visible and constantly give them something that's interesting and compelling and branded, people are going to take note.
And you list some trends that people need to be aware of when they're trying to develop their personal brand. And I love to kind of unpack a few of these because I think it's really important for people to hear. First is this nexting that a typical worker is going to have 10 or more jobs in their lifetime. So your mantra in this, and I'd love for you to give more detail, is match first, stand out second.
You really are prepared, Charles. People talk about I need to meet all the requirements, and once I meet all the requirements for this position I'm looking for, boy, I'm in. Actually, you're not. Because guess what? There are hundreds of other people who can tick the box next to everything required for that job. Unless you're the king of England, right? He's the only person I can think of who there's only one person for that job, at least right now, right? And it will be filled by we already know who's going to have it next. If you don't have that job, if that's not what you're pursuing or that opportunity, you really need to think about what makes me stand out. So first, you need to make sure that you can tick the boxes, and then you need to think, what is it that I offer that's not going to be available from everyone else? What's going to get people really excited about me? How can I contribute something that's so unique and valuable that it's going to not only tip the scales in favor of me, people are going to come after me. They're going to look for me to come work on their team or take on this new job or whatever it is. And I think that's the key. If you don't match, you're not even going to be considered, but that just gets you into the game. It's the standing out part that gets you selected.
That's great. And I agree with you. And many people need to reverse the order because so many people want to be influencers and want to differentiate themselves, and they could be working themselves out of positions they really want because they're not matching first. The other thing is, like it or not, Google results are quickly becoming everyone's first impression. So if people want to learn about you, they're going to open up their browser, enter your name, and see what comes up. So digital first is your priority versus trying to do other things that might influence their thinking, correct?
Absolutely. Whenever we want to learn about someone or something, our first thing is instant Google. And because of two cognitive biases we have, the first is primacy, which means we believe the first thing we learn. So if I were to Google you, Charles, whatever comes up, and now I know you, of course, but if I didn't know you, whatever comes up, that is who you are. When you combine primacy with another cognitive bias called anchoring, this is where the trouble begins because anchoring means we don't want to change our mind. So even if I did meet you and you're really not like your Google results, I am connected to your Google results and it's hard for me to let go. So we really need to proactively and regularly manage our online ID if we want to influence people and give them a bits and bytes impression of us that is consistent with who we are in the real world.
Great. So now the first step in uncovering your brand that you mentioned is discovering who you really are, what sets you apart. I think a lot of people skip this step. They really want to get to the other piece, but unless you really know who you truly are, you're not going to be able to have a differentiated brand that speaks to your authentic self. And you give some great laws on successful personal branding. And a few that I want to kind of just point out, and then you can speak in detail on these is what other people think counts. Your brand is held in their hearts and minds of those around you, right? So it's not just, it doesn't matter just what you think. You really have to be cognizant of what other people think and their perceptions of you.
Absolutely. This is your brand. You can walk around all day saying, I'm the most innovative person on the planet. And that's great if you believe that. But if we ask 10 people who know you what words they'd use to describe you, and they don't use the word innovative, you do not own the brand attribute of innovative, right? If we didn't think that W hotels were trendy or that Apple was good at design, Apple could try really hard, but it's not going to play. So it's really important to let people know who you really are by demonstrating what makes you great. And the more you can do that regularly, the less you have to tell people who you are and what you're about, the more they know it and they're able to tell other people. Personal branding is show and tell, but you can't do show or tell unless you know exactly what your brand is about. Who are you? What makes you great? Why should you care? Where are you going? What are your values? What are the things that people should know about you? What separates you from everyone else? What are the things that you are better at than anyone else on the planet?
An important point that you make, that although it needs to be based in authenticity, your brand must position you for what's next.
Yeah, and people think this is a big contradiction, but it's based in who you really are, and you need to know what it takes. What are the elements of your brand or the things that you're willing to learn and grow and experience so that you can be ready for that next big gig, whatever that is. And it could be inside your own organization. You just want to take on more leadership or you want to move to a different part of the organization, whatever it is. But you really need to know what that is because that's the direction for your brand. Then you can start to think about what are the things that will get me there when these opportunities come to me. Which ones should I choose because they're going to position me for that? Which are the elements of my brand I want to really talk about in my LinkedIn about because they're not only relevant today, but they're relevant to that thing I want to do next.
And for some, it's hard to have that, right? Because they don't even know what they want to do next. They're just focused on what they are currently doing and touting their wares. So it's having a perspective change, a mindset shift, so that they can look and discover what they really want, what their values are, where do they want to go. And that's going to inform their brand, not only now, but in the future.
That's exactly right. I know you know Dory Clark, right? She wrote a book called The Long Game, right? It's about what is that ultimate thing, and then like let's come back and say what are the steps that I need to take to make that happen. And a lot of that is being self-aware. Who are you? What's your purpose? Why are you here on Earth? How do you connect what you do with your passions and your purpose and your values? So that clarity and that distant positioning, I think they're really important parts of the first phase of personal brand.
Let's move into the three stages of building a powerful brand because those are really informative to know. The first phase is undifferentiated, second phase is distinguished, and the third phase is demanded. Let's focus first on that. Undifferentiated, you aren't a brand right now, you're more of a commodity, right?
That's exactly it. It means you can do everything that's required to do your job, right? You're totally fine at what you do, but every interaction you have is a transaction, right? And you're constantly rebuilding connections and whatnot. There's nothing that makes you stand out and gets people excited about you. But this second phase, right, distinguished, this is a good place to be because it means not only can you tick the box next to everything required to do your job, but there's something valuable, unique, interesting that you offer in addition. That creates a little bit of a fan club. People are like, "Oh yeah, you got to meet Charles, right?" And there's something amazing about him, and then people tell us what that is, and that's a good place to be. Not as good is in that third category, which is really where you become a brand in demand. It means that your fans are actually promoters now. They're telling the rest of the world how absolutely incredible you are, why you need to work with them, and your brand starts to take on a life of its own. And that gives you this attraction opportunity where things come to you, right? Because you're the person that people want to work with because you offer something that's only available from you. And that's where we all want to be, right? No one should be looking for whether they're inside a company or they want to move somewhere else. No one should have to go out and look for that job. You should build your brand such that that job or that opportunity inside your company comes to you.
And I want to remind our listeners too, because I get this question asked a lot. There's no shortcuts to this. You got to put in the time, the work, the effort, and it's going to make a difference in the long run. But like Will said, with Dory's book, The Long Game, it's playing the long game, doing the right things now, and doing them consistently over a long enough period of time to where you see those results.
Oh, I'm so glad you say that. A lot of people think, gosh, and some people think, well, woo, I've done the brand discovery. I'm branded, and they think it's time to move on to the next thing. But in fact, it's a lifelong process, and it should be fulfilling because it is about aligning who you are with what you do and creating a meaningful, impactful life, right? So you should want to continue doing it, but it's not something. Yeah, you're just going to sort out over a weekend and then be like, on to the next thing.
You also offer, though, several questions that help people because a lot of people don't know what really makes them stand out. They say, well, nothing makes me stand out. I'm not unique. I'm not different. But If you ask certain questions like, what do people frequently compliment you or praise you for? Then you get some idea, oh, I'm good at this, or this is something that I do very well. What are some other questions that they could ask themselves, others, in this kind of this process of self-examination, or asking friends and colleagues to really understand what makes them stand out?
Yeah, so that's a really good one. Another one is, what do people come to you for? And it's not advice or support or whatever. It's the specific kind of advice or the specific kind of support. When people are always looking at you in those, very consistent ways, you can tell that there's something to at least explore there. What comes incredibly easily to you that's not so easy for others? In fact, you give yourself no credit because there's no work involved, right? But you're really good at it, and other people have a major challenge with it. Another great way to identify the things that make you stand out is to take, let's say, look at your last 6 years worth of performance evaluations. And what you do is copy them all out, put them in a document, and put it into Chat GPT, and ask Chat GPT. The prompt is, here are the reviews of one person. Tell me the 5 things that help this person stand out. And ChatGPT is unbelievably brilliant at coming up with identifying some of the things that repeat through all of this text.
That's a great tool and great advice, and that I'm noting as well. So
Yeah, I'm big. I have doubled down on AI. I think it's going to be the most valuable tool for personal branding.
I think everyone should be doubling down right now on AI and whatever it do, because it's not going away and it's certainly not a fad.
That's exactly right.
So the first phase is really getting to know yourself, your values, what makes you stand out. It's not to be sidestepped or press fast forward on. You need to spend the time to do it the right way. And then after you do that, the next step is really to understand the perceptions. What do others think about you? And I loved what you said earlier. The first step is, personal branding is not about being famous. It's about being selectively famous. We don't have to go through all five, but I'll kind of give those five: the decision makers, the doyens, the disciples, the defenders, and the discoursers. That's what you qualify as an effective brand community, is made up of these people. Is there one group that's more important than another group?
Here's what I think. I think disciples are really powerful because they really believe in you. That it's not only good for your ego, but they're good for you, and they're there to tell other people about you. And I think anytime, especially in this world where we are competing with a certain amount of noise, when you can have people who can be sharing your message on your behalf, it can be incredibly valuable. And the way you build those is by delivering value to them. And this is what people forget. It's not about you at all. It's about everything. If you post something online, before you do, ask the question, will this be valuable to the people I seek to influence and impact? And if the answer is no, even if it's the most beautiful thing you've written or you really love the way you show up in that video, don't post it.
That's such an important point that I just want to emphasize, because so many people post things that no one engages with and they wonder why. They wonder, why isn't more people? I mean, this is so fascinating, interesting to me, but it's not serving their target audience. You have to put the customer first and ask that question that you just asked, versus saying, I'm going to post it because I think it's something valuable. I think it's something that needs to be shared. Often it just doesn't resonate like they were hoping.
Well said. It's exactly it.
So the three P's, the formula you get for successful branding is, first is purpose, right? We kind of talked about that. Who are you and what drives you? Then the second P is performance. How do you deliver value at work? Maybe you can give us some unpacking of that and some tips around how can they better deliver that value.
Yeah. So first you need to know it's not value based on you. It's value based on the people who are making decisions about you. So what do they find valuable? The interesting thing about personal branding is it's not only about getting to know you, it's about getting to know the people that you do seek to impress, influence, and impact. And so I suggest that you spend a lot of time understanding what they care about. You might think, "Oh my god, I'm so good at this. I'm gonna do all of this stuff here." But if that's not valuable to your boss, to project managers in your organization, to the members of your team who are, working for you in support of something, it's really not gonna help you. So really get to know every single person, what makes them tick, how do they like to receive information, how do they like to communicate and be communicated to, and what do they find valuable, right, in you? And then that's once you know that, then it's so easy, right? You just do more of that.
And once you examine those skills that are required for you to do your job, you also need to identify what it takes to get you noticed for your next role. because it's all about the next job, the next assignment, the next opportunity that you do have. So the third step is perception, what other people think about you. This is kind of what we've been talking about, but the critical word here is feedback. Get feedback frequently, get it often. Don't wait for once a year performance reviews, and don't be afraid. All great leaders, all highly successful people, they crave the feedback, both positive and negative.
That's exactly right. And there's a problem today because we used to get really significant and valuable informal feedback as part of just being in the office. If we were in the office, we're in a meeting, at the end of a meeting, someone say, "Wow, really good point you made. So you're really good at distilling the complex down to the simple." We don't get that because what happens is we click leave meeting and then join meeting 5 seconds later. So all of these opportunities for that informal feedback, they've diminished. And so what do we need to do? We need to proactively seek that feedback. And that's what really strong brands do. They seek it and they don't get offended by the things that are maybe opportunities for improvement. And they do get excited about those things they learn that maybe people really they find it incredible.
In some cases, though, the higher you go up in the organization, it's hard to get honest feedback. So, what would you recommend to more senior leaders listening to say, here's how you get honest feedback from others because they really need it the most, yet they never get the true unfiltered version, right? Especially if it's coming from someone below them within their company.
Totally. I will tell you. So I have a tool that my company's created, and we use it for this purpose of getting feedback. And we have everyone. There's a demographic scale that people identify themselves at the beginning. And what we have found is that the more senior your position, the less close your self versus others comparison in in this feedback tool are, because people don't tell you what they really think. They tell you what they think you want to hear, right? The more senior you are, that's just what happens. And you have fewer and fewer people you can trust. That's why, people say it's lonely at the top. And I think in many ways it is. Plus, a lot of these people are suffering from imposter syndrome at the same time. So they're not sharing too much that they don't want other people to know. So I think there is a big disconnect. I think the more you can get feedback in any kind of way where people have anonymity in providing it means that you're more likely to be able to rely on it. So any tool that gets you that kind of anonymous feedback is probably going to give you some things that are worth spending some time on.
Now, all brands are clear about their story, and all strong brand managers can tell that story in a variety of ways. But the first step is really to define your story, which I think this is an understated part of building a personal brand. Now, you list, there's 6 categories of content that's going to help you identify those critical elements of your story. They are accomplishments that you've had, your values, your passions, superpowers that you might have, your signature strengths, differentiation, areas in which you really shine, quantifiable facts, and then validation, where you're getting awards, testimonials, accolades. What would you suggest for an individual starting this process to start with first?
So you know what? It actually doesn't matter where you start. What matters is that you put something in every one of those buckets. So we connect with things that I managed a team of 8. I saved my company $10,000. I speak 4 languages. I climbed 3 of the world's tallest peaks. Whatever. So that something gets in there that has to do with quantification, because each of these things have a different way of working with our brain. And when we combine them together, we weave all of those kind of the emotion creating elements like values and passions and the things that really energize us with those really logical, credible pieces. Like, I graduated magna cum laude. I went to this university. I have 15 years experience. I won the top 40 under 40 award. And so when you combine those credential pieces with the other elements that are really likability focused, you tell a story that's compelling, that keeps people interested, right? I think we focus way too much on the credibility in what we do. And the credibility is great. Again, it gets you into the game. It's the emotional piece that's going to make people make a decision about you. So being willing to talk about your values and your passions and your superpowers and the things that, your quirky characteristics, the things that help you stand out, that's going to be successful.
So it's less about chest pounding, about once you've established that there's that threshold with credibility, you've overcome it, you're now seen as credible. And you're right, it's the emotional connection you can make with others. They have to like you. You have to form that emotional bond, which I think a lot of people miss and focus more on all their accolades and accomplishments, which really don't differentiate you or your brand.
Yeah, every decision we make is made based on emotion. There's a part of our brain called the amygdala, and it is the part that lights up when we're in decision-making mode. So we make every decision based on emotion. Now, we don't tell it, hey, I decided to buy a Cuisinart today. I will tell you the 15 logical reasons. It's got 7,000 watts and what I don't know what a Cuisinart does really. I should have used that as an example. But I will tell you all the logical reasons I made the decision, but I probably chose it because it was red or it looked good in the kitchen or it really made me look like I'm a real chef. That's how we make all of our decisions. So, and when we're making decisions about people, the emotional piece is even, we want to work with people we know, like, and trust. And the like piece is so important, right? The trust is the credibility piece, but the know and like, that's the human element of who we are. So we need to amp that up. And now the last thing I'll say about this is now that we're in the mostly virtual world, this screen is a scrim that dilutes the humanity. And our ability to build those emotional connections, it's been diminished drastically. So we have to triple amp up that humanity if we want people to connect with us on a deeper, more emotional level.
Regarding these stories, there's three ways that you identify that they come into use, and small, medium, and large. As small as the tagline. So once you define your story, you can have a tagline. It could be a statement, it could be a promise, or it could be a series of attributes. You have some compelling world one examples in your book. Like one is, I'm a data explorer. I can grow your business by driving deeper understanding through data analytics. That's tough to get the tagline down. It's, to make it succinct and to make it really pop takes some time. I don't think a lot of people have that, even though I think it's an essential piece. I think the elevator pitch, the medium version, is where I like to spend the time, because everyone has been told that, you need your elevator pitch, but most elevator pitches are boring. They speak to you like you're a commodity. How can that be changed to really set them apart?
Yeah, I have to say, here's what the problem is about elevator pitches: conformity. Somehow, someone a long time ago decided that an introduction was, I'm Will and I'm a marketing manager working out of the Boston office and I support Xerox or whatever. And that's it. And what happens is we've been following the leader ever since. And if you're in a meeting and 8 people are introducing themselves, whoever starts, that's going to be the format for an elevator pitch. It's boring, it's not memorable, it's not engaging at all. So I think what you need to do is be willing to, and we don't want to stand out, right? Where it's uncomfortable and people are going to look at us, and everyone else's elevator pitch was kind of standard, and this one is completely different. But I promise you, it will be memorable, and you will be memorable. And over time, if you keep going to meetings with those people, you're going to see that they're going to change their elevator pitches as well. Conformity is the enemy of innovation, and it's the enemy of personal branding. If you're just going to fit in, if you're going to use all of the boring jargon that they use at your company to show that you're like everybody else, you're kind of like everybody else, and you don't stand out.
And three tips you give, which I think are great when you're identifying or redefining your elevator pitch: be brief, be relevant, and be intriguing. And that third one is a little bit harder to quantify, but I think feedback could help out in that way as well. So it's when you're not sure with if it's connecting, ask people, right?
That's exactly it, right? And by the way, if you're doing this in a room, it's hard to do on a Zoom, right? But if you're doing it in a room, you can tell. Like, are people looking at you? Are they, what's their emotion on their face? If you're creating your elevator pitch, here's what I recommend. Think about the three most important things you want people to know about you. That's the maximum we can handle, and we remember things that come in threes. So the psychological power of three is helpful. The second thing is, what is it you want them to ask you about, or at least be curious about? What's the hook? The thing that you're going to be able to have a conversation about. And then the last thing is, what emotion do you want them to feel? Do you want them to feel confident, inspired, curious, intrigued, motivated? What are the things that you want them to feel? And if you can try it out and it kind of fits that criteria, I think it's going to be a winner.
Great. Well, now let's move to the virtual you, because your first impression is more and more likely to be formed online. This means that your digital brand needs to be magnetic, human, and engaging as the real you. There was a time when online branding was a nice to have. Now it's an absolute must. Kind of the caveat here is, though, you can't build your digital brand until you're crystal clear about your authentic real world brand. So that's why we started first with your real world brand, identifying that. So now we can move into this second phase where that's going to be added onto and integrated within this digital brand. So Talk to us a little bit about the digital brand and maybe kind of your Google quotient or your online ID.
If you do not have a stellar, authentic, and compelling online presence, you are going to be left out of a lot of opportunities. It is just how it is right now. And your point is absolutely the perfect one. If you don't do the work up front to know what it is you want to communicate, who it is you're talking to, and what your key differentiator is, right? Your unique promise of value, then all of this is going to be a giant waste of time. You're going to build something online, but it's not necessarily going to be relevant to who you are and what you want to do. You're just really wasting time. So doing that self-awareness piece is critical. And by the way, before we jump into this, one more thing about self-awareness. The number one skill for leaders today, number one skill is self-awareness. There's a great Fast Company article on it. And so this personal branding process does double duty. Not only does it help you build your brand and increase your presence and become more successful, it helps you become self-aware, which is absolutely the core foundational element of being a successful leader, an authentic leader or a hybrid leader or a modern leader, whatever you want to call them. So digital you, here's the thing. It will be your first impression. Online, it 90% of the time is going to be your first impression. And if it isn't your first, it's going to be your second. So you might meet someone briefly at a meeting, and then they're going to want to learn more about you. And hopefully, what's online is going to reinforce and augment what they experienced when they first met you. So you really need to be deliberate and methodical and consistent and always updating your online profile so that when somebody meets you online, they're meeting the same person they'd be meeting if you got to meet on the street somewhere.
How about for those that have a lot of content and they're trying to ditch the dirt, right? They have stuff that's not flattering, uncomplimentary. What would you recommend to them so that they clean up those areas that they really don't want to tell the world about?
Yeah. So, and by the way, sometimes digital dirt can also just be, it's fine stuff. It's just not relevant to where you want to go. You used to work in real estate and now you're in retail, and you don't really want all that real estate stuff mucking up the pure message that you're an expert in retail. So to get rid of it, first of all, here's some great news. Number one, all you need to do is worry about page one of Google results and your LinkedIn profile. Those are the only things you need to focus on. 89% of people never go beyond page one when they're searching something online. So you just want to make sure that that's pure. LinkedIn is your friend because your LinkedIn profile will likely show up in one of the top three spots in a Google search on your name, and almost always in the top spot, like unless you have your own website or whatever. So the good news is, since people are lazy, this is a message. People are lazy, and it works to your advantage because they're not going to be doing all this searching. They're going to click on the first thing they see. If it's your LinkedIn profile, you have 100% control over what's in your LinkedIn profile. So making that really robust and rich and full of multimedia is going to help you, convey your brand.
That's great because we're going to talk about that next because you really advocate for LinkedIn is the first place people go when they want to learn about you in a professional capacity. But before we go there, just so if you have stuff that's uncomplimentary that you really don't want to showcase on that first page, one way I've seen other people do it is they just put more content out so those older searches get pushed down, right?
No, it's actually a really good way to do it. As long as you can get that stuff off. That was a question you asked me, by the way, and I didn't answer it. So what you want to do is move that stuff beyond page one. One way to do it is to just create a lot more relevancy is really important. If it's timely, then Google's going to rank it higher. So over time, that stuff will move away, that older stuff. The second thing is try to get things posted to sites that are really popular. If you can get yourself, in a Forbes article, a sentence about you, or you have an opportunity. Here's something that'll get you on page one: YouTube. Because of universal search, which is the way Google shows results, on page one is not only the text-based content, but there's a row of videos, a row of images, and then a row of real-time content. Google owns YouTube. And so somehow, if you have a video on YouTube and you have the exact same content in written form somewhere else on the web, that YouTube video is 22 times more likely to show up on page one than the same content in text. So, and what's great about video is you're delivering a complete communication. People get to engage and connect with you in a way that they can't when they're just reading the written word. So that's another way that can help move down some of that other content.
Now, some people don't really have the desire or kind of concern about doing videos, but LinkedIn, like you said, is the first place they should go. And it's great tips you offer. So I like to, I mean, this is going to be a very practical portion of the episode here, but just kind of building a dazzling LinkedIn profile. Now, LinkedIn gives you a percentage score for your profile, but it has nothing to do with it being a great profile. It's just kind of checking the boxes. So you really want to focus on quality, right? Not quantity in your LinkedIn profile.
Oh, I'm so glad you say it. By the way, I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. I help the people at LinkedIn build their LinkedIn profiles, which is an interesting side job. But don't pay attention necessarily to everything that they say. And that is the worst thing that they have is your profile is 98%. It just means that you put something in a box. You could have put, they don't even see if it's real sentences that you've put there. It doesn't matter. So ignore that. And what you want to do is get feedback from others to look at your profile and you want to ask them, is it me? Is it exciting? How would you change it? Is there something missing? Is there stuff that's extraneous that doesn't belong there? How can I make this be the digital representation of who I am? And if you get feedback from people you trust, you don't need to fill every box. It doesn't matter if you have something in publications or languages or, really focus on the things that are going to introduce you to people in a compelling way.
And there's three, the big three you call them, which I agree with. It's the headshot, it's the headline, it's the summary. If you only focus on three areas, focus on these three. The headshot, a couple of great tips of advice that you have in the book that, hopefully you can share just to get people to take better headshots.
Yeah. Oh my God. There is there's an organization. It's in one of my Forbes articles. I can't remember the name of the article, but they did research on what people think about people based on their headshot from LinkedIn, and it's kind of scathing. It's like really like crazy stuff, and it is so important because it is how we connect with people, right? We look into their eyes and we make a big decision based on that visual. So you want 60 to 80% of it of the frame to be your face. You want to be facing forward. You want to smile. That's the universal welcome symbol. This way, you're having a conversation with the person who's checking out your profile. No photos where you've cropped out the person next to you and kind of half of your arm is there. No full body shots.
And no selfies, right?
Oh, and no, oh, yeah, they're just the worst. Some people, why would you use your company logo? It's your LinkedIn profile, not your company page. Use a great headshot and let people connect with you on a human level.
Now, I think a lot of people get that I've seen. So that out of the big three, probably the one that I see a lot of need of improvement is the headline. Because you want to think of this as a headline for an ad. It's a job. Grab the reader's attention. If you just simply put it as your job description or your job title, it's not going to be engaging.
That's right. So your job title has to be there, right? It provides relevance. So I'm, a project manager at whatever XYZ company. But then, okay, boring, right? So tell me why you do what you do, how you do what you do, the result of what you do when you do it. You have 220. I think they just increased it to 220 characters. Use as many as you need to grab people's attention. This is like a headline of an ad. And the other thing you want to include, though, because it has to do with the way LinkedIn shows search results, is you want all the keywords you want to be known for in that headline. So that if somebody's searching on those words, you're more likely to show up in a higher position in those results and people will be able to find you. So, and you can fit all of that in 220 characters.
Well, one that I pulled, and I might have come from your book, is Director of Business Development and Events Marketing title, and then a dash, building lasting impressions for exhibitions and events. So it's more compelling, more intriguing.
Yeah. And it's got exhibitions, events, right? It's got all the right terms in it. Yeah.
Now, the summary, this is the area that I struggle with the most because you want to make it memorable. You want to make it something that people are going to want to read more about. So, this is really what makes you come alive in the digital world. And many people don't even fill this out, right?
The biggest shocker to me is that people don't fill it out. It's the most important part of your profile. It will be the most read version of your bio ever. Even for CEOs, I have some CEOs I work with, and their companies spend, some PR agency writes them this amazing bio. It costs $1 zillion, and they put it up on the corporate website. That version of the bio is not read as often as their LinkedIn profile. So, I mean, your LinkedIn about, and it used to be called summary. Now it's called LinkedIn about. And so you really want to make it compelling. And what you were talking about earlier, Charles, where you talked about the 6 buckets of content to tell your story. You use that formula to be able to create a compelling about where you're combining your values and your passions and your superpowers and your differentiators with your accomplishments and your credentials and your accolades so that you weave it together into this compelling story. And one really important thing, when somebody's checking out your profile in LinkedIn, they don't see your entire about. They just see the first 2 or 3 lines. So if those first 2 or 3 lines are not magnetic, if they don't make me wanna know more, if they're not provocative or intriguing or at least really differentiated, they're not gonna click see more. So don't repeat what you have in your headline, right? You've already told me what you do. Make that first few sentences really gripping.
You're right. Your headline shows the relevance. Don't waste this opportunity to connect deeply with viewers by repeating simply what you told them in the headline. Entice them to get to know you. And you even mentioned, which I think is great, be opinionated. Personal branding is not about trying to please everyone. Be courageous. Show the world that you have a point of view. That's going to build a following. That's going to differentiate your brand.
That's exactly right. And sometimes I think we want everyone to like us, so we won't write anything that's even slightly provocative. But I think if you really believe it, if you're convicted, starting out with your point of view, like I think all advertising should be measurable, right? Where there are tons of people who think advertising is supposed to be about creativity and whatnot. But if you really have a story to tell and that's the kernel of that story, then tell me that. And I'm gonna want to know, why is that your point of view?
Few of the things on your LinkedIn profile, make sure you list all your education. Endorsements, they seem silly, but endorsements recommendations do provide credibility. So make sure that you add those and take those seriously. And you have some great tips around recommendations. The one I wanted to focus on is, which I didn't realize until I read the book, is you can also reorder your skills to make the most relevant ones at the top of the list, right?
Yeah, most people don't know that you can do this, and it's a really powerful tool. The way that they're positioned is based on the number of endorsements you've received for each of those skills, from highest to lowest. But you might have number 4, maybe relationship building, and that might be the most important thing for you and what you want to do next. And you can literally, in edit mode, just grab it and move it to the top. So care less about the number of endorsements you received and more about the specific skill that they're talking about.
How about this one? You said claim your vanity URL. I don't think many people know that they can do this. Can you give us some more detail around this?
If you don't choose your own URL for LinkedIn, your LinkedIn URL, direct URL will be linkedin.com/in/ your name 702-904-33QQ11249 or something. You can literally make it be anything you want it to be after the slash in. And it could be your name, it could be your name's CPA, your name MD, whatever you want it to be. And then it makes it easier for people to find you. It makes it easier for you to direct people to your profile.
Great, great advice. So now that we've talked about the real you and that real to virtual translation process now is behind you, you spent the time to really develop the digital you. It's now time to start thinking about amping up the appeal of your communications. So, talking about images, color, techniques that many people just take for granted, don't think they have an interest in. We already kind of touched upon the picture and using the picture of yourself and kind of what to do with that. I like to focus more on kind of the color and the fonts that you're using, because I think a lot of people don't even realize this could be a differentiator right here.
Exactly, and every company has their own brand ID system, right? Their colors and the images and the fonts, and do they use photographic images? Do they use illustration? And we recognize them that way. That's what if you're at the airport and you're going to go to get your car, right? You don't have to look for Avis or National or Hertz. You're looking for the red or the green or the yellow, right? Those colors are synonymous with those brands. So the more you can use your own color consistently, the more people will recognize things as coming from you. A great place to use that color is in the background of your LinkedIn profile. What your headshot sits up against, right? If you don't choose your own background, it's this ugly greenish gray standard issue. 500 million people have this exact one at LinkedIn, right? The other 500 million people have come up with something that's a little bit more compelling. So that's a great place to be able to use it. If you write a resume, just using this color as your accent color in that resume, again, it's just going to reinforce that brand color that you use.
That's great because color sells, it persuades, it cajoles. You mentioned color, identifying it, making sure it's a web safe color so that you can use it in any, and then using it in your signature, using it on emails, using it in anything that you're sending out. So making sure that you ask that question: Is this on brand for me? And that includes colors. That even includes fonts. That you say there's some fonts that, like the sans serif fonts, are newer and more modern. Common ones include Helvetica and Verdana, but that could also speak to your personality and really help to differentiate your brand as well.
That's right. And once I think this is what happens is when you select your brand fonts and colors and images and all of that, it makes your life so easy. When you have to create something, even if you're in business on your own, you want to create an invoice or a proposal or a presentation, you're just going to use that same set of imagery over and over and over. So it makes your life easy. It's not about recreating the wheel all the time. It's about just reusing and repurposing that same set of brand identity elements.
The other piece that I think so many people miss in terms of their personal brand to really show what that is on their signature. A lot of people have very generic signatures. Talk to us a little bit about some of the standard stuff and the important stuff that you need to include within your signature for emails, for everything.
Yeah. So first, you want to make it easy for people to find you. So however you prefer to interact with people, make sure that that's there. It could be your LinkedIn profile, and so that people can message you. It could be, your phone number or your email, whatever it is. Using color, even if it's just a line of color between your name and your contact details, is a great thing to use. If you have written, let's say you were in Forbes last month or in Inc. and you want to be able to point people, check out my latest article I contributed to in Inc. Give people a way to learn more about you by sending them to something that's recent. Or here's my latest podcast or my latest video at YouTube, so that you're giving me an opportunity to learn more. I don't have to click on it, but if I'm interested, I'm going to. A new thing I'm having people do, and you can do this with pretty much anything that's important, is create QR codes for the things that are important to you, including your LinkedIn profile. So, for example, if you are writing a cover letter or a resume, just put that little QR code there. Number one, it shows that you're using technology in a positive, powerful way. Number two, you're making it easy for people to be able to access that content. And number three, it just makes whatever you're doing a little bit more visually compelling, right? Because a QR code's much more interesting than a string of text that somebody could link to. So there are lots of things. You could have your own photo may be appropriate at the bottom of your emails. Just think about what's appropriate to your target audience.
That's great to think on. The final section really is now kind of looking at the social you and trying to build up that social community and get connected with those that matter. If someone's starting out or doesn't have a large community, what would you recommend them do? I mean, in your writings and your research, you said, connect with the connected and join groups. But kind of give us some more detail around those so people know kind of a good starting point.
Yeah. So first of all, and this is going to sound like it goes against something I said earlier, but it really doesn't. Be promiscuous when it comes to connecting with people. Be open to connections. There are some people who are so close. They say, "I'm a bankruptcy lawyer, and so the only people I am connecting with are other bankruptcy lawyers and people who hire bankruptcy lawyers, and that's it." This will work against you. There's lots of research, and you can just Google this: the power of weak ties and these kind of second level connections that are valuable to you. Once my dentist got me business because the person who sat in the chair after me was the head of learning and development at Blue Cross Blue Shield. And I talked to him about what I do, right? I have a network connection with my dentist, and he referred me. It's the same with LinkedIn. Your first level connection could be the sales agent at Dollar General, and they could have in their network the CEO of Walmart, who happens to be the next door neighbor or something. So be a little bit promiscuous, right? You're going to communicate the messages that are relevant to your audience, but you're going to be open to speaking to a lot of people. So when people send you a connection request, if you think it's legit, they seem like a real person, accept it. Then go proactively seek out people you want to have in your network, right? Who are the people that are your community, your peers, your people, and just start to add them. And then as you meet people, instantly add them. Anytime you meet a new person, instantly they become a part of your network. And if you get in the habit of that, what happens is you have all your people in one place at LinkedIn. And that is great because guess what? We talked at the beginning. I think you started out, Charles, talking about how many jobs we're going to have in our lifetime. So if you only have a connection to someone because of their email address, and next year they're at a new company, your connection to that person has gone away. But if they're in your LinkedIn connections, you still have a connection no matter if they move 12 companies away from where you first met. So it's a great way to be able to have an ongoing relationship with people in a world where the average stay at a job is 4.3 years.
Great advice. Before we end, I'd like to get to the final piece, really, which is, now that you've updated your network, you're actively building it, you still need to nurture those relationships. And the important thing that you mentioned is don't toot, let others tout your wares. And you have this great model, this framework called the 5-8 plates when building your brand communication with the people in your network. And that first plate is around the purpose of updating is to remain visible to your community. So you want to not let it grow stagnant, right?
That's right, and you can update in LinkedIn by just saying, "Hey, today I'm at a conference, we're talking about this, and here's something really interesting I learned. I think you'll find it valuable," right? Take you seconds to do. You could also there's something I do every quarter. I have what I call my favorite people list. So my regular company list, we have 88,600 people, but in my favorite people list, I have 482 people or something like that. They're the people I'm really connected to. And once a quarter, I just update them, say, "Hey, here's what happened last quarter, and this is what I'm working on, and I haven't talked to you in a while. Let's set up some time." And it kind of goes out. So just staying on people's radar is really important. Sometimes I don't connect with those people, right? I can't connect with 482 people every quarter, but they're reminded, and over time you do stay connected. So just creating those updates so that relationships don't go stale, critical.
Now, plate two is the create, content creation. It takes a lot more time than updating, but it's one of the most powerful ways to differentiate yourself and build expertise.
Yeah. If you want to demonstrate your thought leadership, pick something and do it regularly, right? Like Charles, you have this podcast, right? And we can count on you constantly interviewing people, and we can just become a follower and pay attention to everything you're doing. When you have something that's a series, it's a lot more valuable than a one-off, right? If you did a one-off interview and published it somewhere, it wouldn't have the kind of impact with you constantly delivering value to your audience. So think about what it is you want to do. Maybe you want to write an article once a month or once a week and publish it to LinkedIn. LinkedIn newsletters, really great new feature, which allows you to be regular with your community. Just choose a cadence that works for you. The more you can do something as a series, the more you're able to refer people back and forth. They can say, "Well, I saw this. Well, maybe something that came before was really interesting, and I'm going to pay attention to the next thing that gets published," so that you can build that ongoing relationship with people.
And you say when creating content, you want to have it be a strawberry, right? You kind of liken this to food, but kind of give us some more insights into being a strawberry. But at least you want to have 2 to 3 characteristics to really engage your audience. So you use some other food analogies as well.
Yeah, well, so here's the thing of the strawberry. It took me a long time to come up with this one. I have lots of models and frameworks, and usually they come like that. And this one took me forever. But the idea of the strawberry test is a strawberry has three main elements, at least as it relates to what we're talking about here. First, it's inviting. You ever walk past a Godiva store and they have the chocolate covered strawberry, right? Even if you're not hungry, you kind of want that strawberry. So it's inviting, and you need to attract people's attention. When you create content, make sure you're doing that. The second piece, it's bite size. It's a strawberry. It's not a watermelon. It's not a cantaloupe, right? It's something that you can consume really easily. So if you have to write a white paper and it's 50 pages long, come up with an executive summary, because I'm not going to really engage in a white paper right now. But I have enough time to polish off a strawberry. And then the third element is it's good for you, right? Strawberries actually have 11 health benefits I learned in investigating this this model that I came up with. So make sure that what you're sharing is valuable. Don't waste people's time. Put some really good nuggets of value in there. And if you can pass the strawberry test, if you can pass all three of those, then you know that people are going to start to continue to want to engage in your work because it's valuable, it's meaningful for them.
And if you can, at least two out of those 3 criteria, you want to make sure so that it's valuable and meaningful to them, like you just stated. Now, if you don't want to create, you can also curate content. If you're feeling like you don't have the time to put forth an article, a podcast, whatever the case may be, you can still share other people's posts, disseminate information from articles, from publications, right? That would still have value for your audience.
Yeah, I think curation, which is really stealing other people's content, not really stealing exactly, but kind of borrowing in a really powerful way. You're making their content more valuable. So they're thrilled that you're doing that, right? but it gives you an opportunity to express your point of view. Just sharing it without adding your point of view, adding why you're sharing it, folks, has no value to you. But when you make whatever you share more valuable by saying, boy, Charles, he just came up with the 16 points of things that you need to do to have a successful career. They're really great. And I found numbers 6, 11, and 12 to be the most powerful. And here's why. When you do that, you're saying there's some brilliant work from this guy named Charles. And here's something that makes it even a little bit more meaningful from my perspective. And it's a win-win for both. And for people who are not really, where they're like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to create content. Curation is your best friend.
Now, if creation of content's not for you, if you don't want to curate, then plate 4 is just to restate, which I like to say is repurposing content that you already have in different forms. So you can chop up a podcast interview like I do and repurpose that. You can create blog posts out of it. So there's lots of ways to do that to fit into this category, correct?
Yeah, you do this brilliantly, right? We're doing this as a video. You're going to have the audio version of it as well. You'll be able to pull little clips out and be able to use them for things. So exactly, if you can take the same content and reuse it, do so. Most people never even see the content you publish. In LinkedIn, only between 2 and 5% of people see what you post because they have to be either in their feed when you post it or in your feed when you post it. So people haven't gotten sick of your content yet because it's not so likely that they've seen it. So the more you can repurpose it, the more successful you'll be.
And the final thing I think is important to, I mean, it sounds like common sense, but it's really important. It's to evaluate, see what's resonating, what's connecting, what's going viral, what are people reacting to. And if you really have in the back of your mind as your overall purpose that you want to serve your audience, then you need to adjust, course correct every now and then so that you're really connecting better with that audience and doing more of what they want.
That's exactly right. I used to have this video series that I really loved. I loved doing it. I loved creating the content and writing the scripts and doing the videos. And guess what? It never got views. They were just like literally. I was like, why don't people like this? I love it. I thought they'd like it. They're my people, and they didn't like it. And you know what the right answer is? Don't do it. Like literally, I just have to let it go and find something that people like. And so I think sometimes we have, that I have a friend who's a writer. She always says you need to kill your darlings, right? There's stuff that you've written for your book, but it just isn't relevant. It just doesn't belong there, and you have to just get rid of it. And so sometimes that's the right answer.
Well, thank you so much, Will, for a great conversation today around personal branding. I think we've given our listeners a lot of helpful tips, tools, and techniques to use. If there's one thing they can start with, what would you recommend them start with? I assume it's in that first phase of just getting more self-aware, but is there a tool or a technique that you would recommend that they begin with first?
Yeah. So I think self-reflection. Ask yourself questions. Who am I? What's important to me? What are my top 5 values? What problem in the world would I love to contribute to solving? What are the things I think I do better than anyone else? What are the things that I love to do more than anything at work every day? The more self-reflective you are, the more you start to ask other questions of you. Well, why is it that I like creating PowerPoint slides and so forth? So be self-reflective and ask for feedback, and you'll start to get some clarity about your brand, and then you can move to the next step.
Thank you so much for joining me today. Remind our listeners how they can get in contact with you or learn more about your work.
Well, williamarruda.com is a great place to go, or of course, LinkedIn. I'm a big LinkedIn user and fan. So thanks. And Charles, thanks so much. You're so gifted at interviewing. This is why you've chosen this to be your content creation tool. So thanks for letting me be a part of it.
Thank you, Will.
If you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to share with others and post about it on social media. You can also go to our YouTube channel, which has video recordings of all the episodes of this podcast, along with bite-sized segments called single servings that are designed to answer your most pressing leadership and management questions. Remember, until next time, it's not what you know that counts, but what you do consistently that makes a difference.